Have you ever wondered what happened when one of the greatest explorers in human history reached the shores of Indonesia? Not centuries after his fame, not in a legend, not in a myth, but in reality. Long before modern nations existed, long before maps were complete, long before Europe truly understood the vast civilizations of Asia, a man whose name would echo across generations sailed into the waters of Sumatra. His name was Marco Polo, and what he discovered here would become one of the earliest European records of the Indonesian archipelago. Most people know Marco Polo as the legendary Venetian explorer who traveled across Asia and documented extraordinary cultures, kingdoms, and peoples unknown to most Europeans of his time. His journeys changed the way Europe viewed the East. His writings inspired explorers for centuries. Even Christopher Columbus carried a copy of Marco Polo's accounts during his own voyages. But there is one chapter of Marco Polo's journey that remains largely forgotten, a chapter connected to Indonesia, a chapter connected to Sumatra, a chapter connected to an ancient coastal town whose influence reached far beyond its size, the town of Barus. More than 700 years ago, in the year 1292, Marco Polo arrived on the island of Sumatra during his long voyage home from China. At that time, he had already spent many years in the service of the great Mongol ruler Kublai Khan. His journey to China had begun when he was still a teenager. Together with his father and uncle, he crossed deserts, mountains, kingdoms, and trade routes stretching across Eurasia. The trip took years, the dangers were immense, yet Marco Polo persevered. By the time he departed China, he had witnessed one of the most powerful empires the world had ever known. But the voyage home would prove just as remarkable. In 1292, Marco Polo joined a massive Mongol fleet tasked with escorting a princess from China to be married into a ruling family in the western reaches of the Mongol world. The journey covered thousands of kilometers across dangerous seas. Storms threatened the ships, disease threatened the crew. The ocean itself seemed determined to test every traveler aboard. And along this historic voyage, Marco Polo stopped in northern Sumatra. What he encountered there fascinated him, because Sumatra was not an isolated land hidden from the world. It was already connected to international trade networks that stretched from China to India, from Arabia to Africa, and beyond. For centuries, merchants had crossed these waters carrying spices, silk, precious woods, resins, and knowledge. The Indonesian archipelago was already becoming one of the most important crossroads of global civilization. Among the places associated with Marco Polo's visit stands Barus. Today, Barus is located in central Tapanuli Regency of North Sumatra. To many people, it may seem like a quiet coastal town, but appearances can be deceiving, because Barus possesses a history so extraordinary that it challenges common assumptions about the origins of trade, religion, and cultural exchange in Southeast Asia. Hidden between lush green hills and the breathtaking western coastline of Sumatra lies a place that once attracted merchants from across the known world. For centuries, ships sailed toward Barus from distant lands. Arab traders knew it, Persian merchants knew it, Indian sailors knew it, Chinese travelers knew it. Even people living thousands of kilometers away had heard of its fame. Why? Because Barus was one of the world's most important sources of camphor. Known in Indonesia as kapur barus, this precious substance was one of the most sought-after commodities of the medieval world. Today, many people think of camphor as a simple household product, but in ancient times, it was worth a fortune. Camphor was used in medicine, it was used in religious ceremonies, it was used in perfumes, It was used in preservation techniques. Kings desired it, merchants competed for it, empires traded for it, and some of the highest quality camphor on earth came from the forests surrounding Barus. The reputation of Barus became so great that its name appeared in records from distant civilizations. Its products traveled across oceans and continents. Its influence extended far beyond the shores of Sumatra. Yet Barus was important for more than trade. It also played a significant role in one of the most transformative developments in Indonesian history, the arrival and spread of Islam. For generations, historians have studied the early history of Islam in the Indonesian archipelago. Among the most fascinating discoveries are the ancient Islamic tombstones found in and around Barus. These tombstones suggest that Muslim communities were present in the region centuries ago. Some evidence indicates connections reaching back to the early centuries of Islamic civilization. This makes Barus one of the most important locations in understanding how Islam first established roots in Indonesia. The story challenges the simplistic idea that religion spread through conquest alone. In Indonesia, Islam often traveled along trade routes. It spread through merchants, scholars, travelers, and cultural exchange. Ports became meeting places, markets became classrooms, conversations became bridges between civilizations. Barus stood at the center of these interactions. People from different ethnicities, languages, and beliefs met here. Ideas crossed oceans, knowledge crossed generations, faith crossed borders. The result was a unique cultural legacy that helped shape the identity of the Indonesian archipelago. Imagine standing on the shores of Barus 700 years ago, the harbor filled with ships from distant lands, languages from across Asia and the Middle East echoing through the markets, merchants negotiating valuable cargo, religious scholars exchanging knowledge, travelers sharing stories from worlds beyond the horizon. This was not the edge of civilization, this was one of its crossroads. And among those travelers stood Marco Polo, one of history's most famous explorers, observing, recording, learning, witnessing firsthand the richness and complexity of a region that many Europeans knew almost nothing about. His accounts would become part of the historical record that introduced parts of Southeast Asia to the Western world. Yet perhaps the most remarkable lesson is not about Marco Polo himself. It is about Indonesia. Because the story of Barus reminds us that the Indonesian archipelago has never been merely a collection of islands. It has long been a meeting point of civilizations, a place where cultures connected, a place where commerce flourished, a place where ideas transformed societies, a place where history was being written long before modern borders existed. Too often, the world's attention focuses on famous capitals and major empires. But history is also shaped by places like Barus, places whose names may not dominate headlines today, but whose influence once reached across continents, places that helped connect humanity, places that helped shape the world. The story of Marco Polo's visit to Sumatra is more than an interesting historical footnote. It is a reminder that Indonesia has been part of global history for centuries. Its people were not isolated observers. They were active participants in international networks of trade, culture, and faith. They helped build connections between civilizations. They helped move ideas across oceans. They helped create the interconnected world we know today. So the next time someone mentions Marco Polo, remember this. His story is not only the story of Venice. It is not only the story of China. It is also part of the story of Indonesia. A story written on the shores of Sumatra. A story carried by the winds of the Indian Ocean. A story preserved in the ancient legacy of Barus. And a story that deserves to be remembered by the world. Because hidden within this quiet corner of North Sumatra lies proof that history's greatest journeys often lead to places that modern society has forgotten. But forgotten does not mean insignificant. Sometimes, the most extraordinary chapters of human history are waiting in places few people think to look, and Barus is one of those places.